No one can teach the European Union lessons about democracy. We are fighting a fire. The EU will succeed.
This year didn't start well for the European Commission. Its rollout of the COVID-19 vaccine has been widely slammed as too little and too late. But now it's decided to invest millions into researching new COVID variants and to try and get some better headlines. My guest this week from Brussels is the Greek Commissioner Margaritis Schinas. Will the new initiative be enough to silence the criticism of the Commission and the charges of incompetence? Margaritis Schinas, welcome to Conflict Zone.
Thank you for having me.
You're pouring tens of millions of euros into research on new COVID variants. Tell me this isn't just an elaborate PR exercise to boost your flagging image at the Commission.
No, it is not. It is the response to a genuine worry that we have both here in Brussels and in the capitals of our union, because the mutations are happening and these mutants are practically everywhere. So we need now to, parallel to our vaccines program, we need to develop this capacity to anticipate, to adapt and facilitate the work to be able to cope with all these potential threats, risk to the variants.
Yeah, but there's a lot of work going on in this field at the moment anyway. The World Health Organization said in January that it was coordinating a massive amount of research on the same subject. And drug companies are, of course, working on second-generation vaccines to take account of these new strains. So what are you bringing to the table that's going to be new?
We're bringing to the table speed authorization procedures through our European Medicines Agency that would allow these companies not to resubmit from scratch, but being able to update the files on the basis of which they have already their vaccines authorized in the European market. We're bringing money because for sequencing, testing, and clinical trials at a certain scale, we need EU funding. And more than anybody else, we need pressure to everybody involved to anticipate events and prepare.
Which hasn't been your strong point so far, has it? I mean, the issue isn't money. We know you've got plenty of money. Frankly, the issue, given the painfully slow rollout of existing vaccines, is whether you're competent as a commission to manage all these projects. Are you?
I think the story has not been told of the European vaccination strategy. The success of our plan will have to be assessed not at the beginning of the process, but at the end of it. We have pre-purchased 2.3 billion doses of vaccines for all Europeans. We have bought the 25% of the global supply. We have already dispatched 30 million doses in Europe, and we have already vaccinated 22 million Europeans. This is not lack of success. This is success in the making.
Mr. Schinas, last week the Commission President, let's face it, was forced into a humiliating admission that the EU was, as she put it, not where it wanted to be in combating the virus. This after hailing the rollout as a great European success story. But it hasn't been, has it? Fact is, you were late in granting vaccine authorizations, too optimistic about the production of the vaccine, too naive in believing that all the doses would arrive on time. You were 3 months behind the UK in ordering some of these vaccines. You admitted all this. This was all admitted, but there was no apology. Why? Why was there no apology?
This is the European Union. In the European Union, politicians do not authorize vaccines.
They don't apologize either, do they?
We have independent regulatory agencies to do that. And I think that the process, we are not in the course of speed. This is not a sprint, it's a marathon. Now, as to the question of apology, that I leave the humiliating part to you to describe. But this was something the president stated the obvious, that these companies with whom we had contractual relations and they assumed contractual obligations were not ready at the beginning of these contracts to put the capacity that the contracts would have required. And they are sorting these delays out as we speak. So the apology was an apology at the moment of the start of the contracts. I'm telling you again, the EU will succeed in our vaccination strategy.
The fact is, Mr. Schinas, that people will have died in Europe waiting for you to take decisions and get them the vaccines that could have saved their life. Someone should take responsibility for that and resign, or is there no accountability in this commission of yours?
We are fully accountable to the European Parliament, to which we invested us in a vote of a year ago. And the European Parliament is fully in line, as are all governments of our member states, in making this European program of vaccination a success. I leave it to your imagination what would have happened if instead of a European strategy, member states would have gone it individually, fighting each other over vaccines. The big member states would have swapped the market. The smaller member states would have never had access to the vaccines. So we are making this work for everyone, and it's working, believe me.
Well, you say this, but this week the senior Liberal MEP and former Belgian Prime Minister Guy Verhofstadt accused Ursula von der Leyen of prolonging drastically the COVID pandemic on mainland Europe at a huge cost to lives and the economy. He called the management of the pandemic a fiasco and said after 2 months, the rollout of vaccines is dramatically low in Europe. So you're painting a very different picture from the one that members of the European Parliament are seeing. You're in trouble if figures like Mr. Verhofstadt are turning against you in this way.
You are quoting one of the 751 members of the European Parliament.
I can quote others if you like.
No, but you should quote a majority to make the point that the European Parliament is against the Commission or vaccine strategy. You know, in Brussels, there is what I call the intellectual appeal of pessimism. Somehow, to be trendy, to be modern, to make headlines, you have to be a pessimist in the Brussels bubble. Well, I do not believe in this school of thought. I'm an optimist. And I repeat what I told you earlier. This European strategy is working. And at the end of the process, you will see that will be one of the most remarkable European success ever.
Well, that's what you say, but key figures are losing patience with you. In Germany, for instance, the Chief Minister of Bavaria, Markus Söder, accused the Commission of lacking the necessary sense of urgency and following the typical, normal, bureaucratic EU procedure. He's right, isn't he? People have a right to expect better from you, don't they?
Of course, people have right to expect better, but I would also distance myself from comments coming from a country like Germany, where the election is already underway and where many key players are jogging for position ahead of the elections, and they always find very convenient to target Brussels on basically everything. You know.
Well, you find it convenient to give me a success story which hasn't yet happened. Because you're under political pressure at the moment. You're under huge political pressure because of the rollout of vaccines, you know, and for the history of failure dealing with this pandemic. I mean, last year, there were admissions from Ursula von der Leyen that the fundamental purpose of the EU, which was unified decision-making, has been sorely lacking. She said at the time, when Europe really needed to be there for each other, too many initially looked out for themselves. When Europe needed an all-for-one spirit, too many initially gave an only-for-me response. The Commission is the European Union's executive. If you can't unite this union, isn't it time to hand over to some people who can?
I would agree with you that in the beginning of the pandemic, our member states last March reacted a bit like individuals. Individuals stormed the supermarkets and bought toilet paper and pasta, hoping that they will survive the pandemic. Member states closed borders, they produced export bans, they tried to compete against each other, but that only lasted 3 to 4 weeks. After
really?
that,
members are still closing borders. Germany closed its borders last week, its southern borders, causing traffic jams back into Italy, ignoring the Justice Commissioner, who warned that it could lead to supply chains being disrupted.
This now concerns 2 member states. At the time, it were all member states. The point I was trying to make before you interrupted me is precisely that given the interdependence of our single market, the integration of our supply chains, we can do things together we can do things better only if we do them together. And this is happening as we speak. And again, let me tell you that from borders to public procurement to pooling money for research to pre-buying vaccines, all this is part of a common European response which is working.
Well, you say it's working, and I've quoted you people who don't think it is working. How do we know, for instance, that there won't be a repeat of the January 30th fiasco where your Commission panicked about the shortage of vaccines and threatened to trigger a clause in the Northern Ireland Protocol that would have blocked the vaccines from reaching Northern Ireland? The decision was reversed after 2 days and an international outcry. You're not telling me that that was part of your success story, are you?
The measure was not related to Northern Ireland or Article 16 protocol. The measure, which was a valid one, was a scheme for an export authorization procedure that would allow the Commission to know what's happening with vaccines produced in the European market.
But it would have impacted Northern Ireland, and it would have torn up the Northern Ireland Protocol.
There was a negative impact on the Northern Irish border, which was remedied, I would say, instantly on the same day, and for which President von der Leyen herself admitted that this was an administrative mistake that happened against a very broader measure, which we needed and we still need by the time to know who exports where vaccines produced in Europe under contractual obligations with Europe.
You said it was an administrative mistake. Whose fault was that?
Well, sometimes, when you have to go into ultrasonic fast procedures, because when you put in place an export authorization scheme, you don't have the time, a week or 10 days to organize things. You have to do it in a few hours.
No, but I asked you whose fault it was. Who's going to take responsibility for this?
The President herself took responsibility publicly, urbi et orbi, at the European Parliament twice last week. She said that she assumes personal responsibility for the administrative mistake that happened on that day and which was rectified 2 hours later.
So how do we know it's not going to happen again, one of these administrative mistakes? I mean, this caused an enormous amount of diplomatic backlash for you, didn't it? The Irish government wasn't informed in advance, nor the British government, nor the Northern Ireland Assembly. Ireland's own ambassador called it a very serious mistake. How do we know you're not going to do it again? Because what lessons have you learned from that?
Well, let me repeat that when the Commission takes market-related measures on export authorizations, we have to go very, very fast. Otherwise, these measures will be violated by events on the ground. So these decisions have been taken in an afternoon, and I tried to explain to you that these were decisions that were valid because we need these market export authorization systems to know how the vaccines are being exported and to whom from Europe. The fact that a mistake had happened, which was corrected immediately, does not mean anything, especially when the President of the Commission herself took it on herself and publicly, in front of the European Parliament, assured MEPs that this will not happen again.
You say it doesn't mean anything, but it smacks of chaos right at the heart of your Commission, doesn't it? Crossed wires, panicky decisions, no thought for consequences, no firm hand in control. You proud of all this?
Look, I can spend also too much time using adjectives, but I belong to a political school of thought that I'm more interested in nouns and in verbs. I don't think that, value judgments in the comfort of a studio can sort out a very complicated situation. We are fighting a fire in a once-in-a-generation threat to humanity and to Europe. And we will do everything that it takes to get it right, and we are getting it right. So I prefer to be positive, to be optimistic, and look with confidence to the future.
It's not just with the pandemic that we've seen missteps, is it? We saw them the other day when your foreign policy chief, Josep Borrell, visited Moscow. Many MEPs said he allowed himself to be totally humiliated and achieved absolutely nothing. Last week, 81 members of the European Parliament called on the Commission President to fire him. Should he be fired, do you think?
Again, you are quoting a relatively small number of MEPs. The European Parliament has 751 members, and the majority for the Parliament to take a stance is half plus one.
It wasn't my question. I asked you whether you should be fired.
I'm answering your question now. Before the High Representative Josep Borrell visited Moscow, do you happen to know how many ministers for foreign affairs from our member states had already visited Moscow? The answer is
that's neither here nor there. Several countries, Poland and the Baltic states, told him not to go. Why were their warnings not listened to?
First of all, he went on the basis of an agreement by the ministers of Foreign Affairs Council to go. Two, we were surprised to see that no one bothered to criticize the 19 ministers who went to Moscow before him, but everyone rushed to attack again Brussels. Scapegoating Brussels and blaming everything on Brussels. It's, again, very convenient, very trendy. It makes you popular. It produces headlines, but it doesn't sort out the problems. We are in the business of sorting out problems.
Well, you didn't sort out any problems, and he didn't sort out any problems because he went with no fixed agenda, didn't he? You don't do engagement sessions, simple engagement sessions at foreign minister level. That's what diplomats are supposed to do, prepare high-level meetings to the smallest detail and find something the ministers can agree on. Borrell thought he knew better, and he didn't, did he?
Let's see about that. Let's see how the noise around this visit materializes in terms of policy. I'm not sure that everything has to be judged on the basis of what happened in a press conference. There were meetings before the press conference and after the press conference, and the foreign affairs ministers of the European Union are meeting next week to assess globally the situation and move accordingly in a collective manner. So the story has not yet been told of this visit.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see how you move in a coordinated manner, because half the problem is that the EU seems incapable of unified action when it comes to Russia. You couldn't even issue a collective statement after the poisoning of the opposition leader Alexei Navalny because it was vetoed by the Hungarian leader Viktor Orban. So you're one more example, aren't you, of a disunited multilateral body that can't agree on clear objectives.
Sorry to break the news, but the European Union does not have the capacity to decide on foreign policy on the basis of qualified majority. Foreign policy is still probably the only one, together with taxation, the only policy where unanimity applies. And unanimity allows everyone to stop everybody else. So, of course, we can self-flagellate and regret and lament that the founding fathers and the governments failed to break this last taboo of European integration, introducing majority voting in foreign policy. But that's the situation. So you are describing a situation which is given and on the basis of which we try to do as much and as best as we can.
So why bother with a foreign policy chief then? The problem is you have a foreign policy chief, but you don't have a unified foreign policy.
Well,
what's the point of the job?
Let me remind you that we already have sanctions against Russia on the statute book. We are already renewing periodically sanctions that have been agreed unanimously. And we do have many other instruments and decisions that have been agreed unanimously. But of course, we do not have a qualified majority that would have allowed us to move differently. This is the situation, and we can spend time lamenting it or regretting it, but I don't think we can change it at this stage.
Mr. Margaritis, China has also benefited from the EU's lack of a consistent foreign policy, hasn't it? You trumpet human rights as a central value to the European Union, but you threw those considerations to the wind when you signed an investment deal with Beijing last month, didn't you? The only assurance from China about human rights was a meaningless and totally unenforceable commitment to make sustained and continuous efforts to ratify international conventions on forced labor. In other words, they do their best. No time scale, maybe 10 years, maybe 100, who knows? But why don't you admit it? You got nothing from the Chinese, did you? Nothing.
Okay, again, leaving the adjectives aside.
Nothing is a noun.
on the substance of your question. With this agreement, the European Union obtained a level of protection of investment by European companies in China that our American partners or friends already have. So this was not an apocalyptic new thing. It was aligning European interests to a level of protection that other Western powers already enjoy with China. So I think it was a necessary agreement, a welcome agreement, and an agreement that creates more jobs and more certainty for our companies and for the economy. And I will also take issue with your assertion that this was done at the back of human rights. Precisely as part of this agreement, there are concrete references to the need to ratify the ILO agreements on child labor. There are relevant considerations of the situation in Xinjiang. The European Union will continue to engage with China in a principled and at the same time pragmatic way.
You didn't impress the European Parliament, did you? There was scathing condemnation in a resolution which was unanimously passed, which said that by rushing to reach this agreement while not taking concrete action against ongoing grave human rights violations in Hong Kong, Xinjiang province and Tibet, the EU risks undermining its credibility as a global human rights actor. The chair of the Parliament's delegation for relations with China, Reinhard Bütikofer, said it's ridiculous for the EU to try selling that as a success. You didn't convince them.
No one can teach the European Union lessons about democracy and respect of human rights. We are the world's epicenter of democracy and good governance. We are
really?
gravely
Look at Poland and Hungary. Can you honestly say that? Can you honestly say that?
Let me first discuss Hong Kong, and then I'm happy to go to Poland and Hungary. On Hong Kong, we are gravely concerned. The situation there is against everything that we stand for. We have repeatedly expressed, both at the Commission and at the Council of Foreign Affairs Ministers, our position and the situation against the democracy, pro-democracy fighters, activists and candidates. And these concerns have been put to President Xi by the European leaders in their meeting of the 30th of December.
Just words, Mr. Margaritis. You had leverage, real leverage with this financial agreement, with this trade deal with China, and you didn't use that leverage.
We used it to the best possible outcome at a level comparable to what our American friends did when dealing with China. So this was not something that failed our standards. We lived up to our standards. The references to ILO resolutions, child labor, situation in Xinjiang are clearly established.
Let's just look briefly at your claim that the European Union is the most advanced model of democracy and society in the modern world. Seems like a classic EU exaggeration when you look at Poland and Hungary. According to human rights organizations, Human Rights Watch, for instance, says 10 million EU citizens in Hungary are effectively living under authoritarian rule. In Poland, the government is accused by the EU itself of violating the union's laws, undermining judicial independence. In Bulgaria, torture is rife, along with massive corruption at all levels of government. How does that fit into the most advanced model of democracy and society in the modern world?
The rule of law and the respect for the rule of law, democracy, and fundamental rights are the jewels in the crown of the European Union. They're non-negotiable. I do not deny that in certain parts of our geography, the weight of history and authoritarianism and totalitarianism still has a resilient presence, if you like. And we are now, for some years, working very, very consistently, and I would say aggressively, to remedy these pathologies in making clear that the rule of law has to be respected by all member states at all levels.
You've been telling Bulgaria that for 14 years.
But instead of doing it only by threatening the nuclear button of Article 7 of the treaty, we have now recently introduced a new approach through a European rule of law mechanism that allows us on a yearly basis to examine the situation in all our member states from the point of view of rule of law, engage in dialogue upstream, and instead of correcting, making sure that we shape a situation the way we like it. We have introduced a mechanism on conditionality with respect to rule of law in the next EU budget. We have very many open infringements against member states for this issue.
So Mr. Margaritis, we're running out of time, unfortunately. We've run out of time.
We hope that this ecosystem will produce change.
Okay, thank you very much for being on Conflict Zone. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you for having me.